What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and we've got a new visitor on our desert island, our comic-loving desert island. I'm joined by Steve of Dark Knight News and Comics in Motion, sort of superheroes for dummies, so much stuff you do. Steve, how you doing? You all right?
It's a pleasure to be here, but I must admit, this was hard. This was really, really hard.
So let me just say, so we set the mission. The sort of the thing for the episode is Desert Island Comics. Pick 3 issues, that you would take to a desert island, and you want to talk about. And as a man who's got such a sort of a strong comic history, like that's a back catalogue to pick from. It's a hell of a back catalogue to pick from. So, but you did it. You did it. I know you took. I know it was hard. You told me repeatedly. I'm not going to apologise because I know.
How many times have I said I hate you to you over the last 3?
You did, yeah, a little bit. But it makes you think. But you did. You chose.
It really does.
You came back and you've chosen 3. So do you want to let the listener know what 3 issues have you chosen for us to talk about today?
It could have been easy, as you know, to go for the ones that people say are important or breakthrough. I mean, don't get me wrong, the 3 I've picked have got some standout moments, but I just picked 3 comics from my entire life that I love. 2000 AD issue 2, The Incredible Hulk 377, and issue 32 of Batman Gotham Knights, and we'll talk about why. But they're just 3 great comics, and that's the long and short of it.
Yeah, one of the things I love about doing all this is because I've got my history of comics, and then I've my chosen, and then when someone else throws these things at you, and this is all 3 of these are good examples. Like I have a history, much as you know, with 2000 AD, so we'll talk about that. But then the Hulk and the Batman one, like they were new to me. Like the Hulk, just off air, I was like,
"Oh my
great.
God!" Oh, in that case, my work here is done.
And especially
brilliant.
Some great things like the Batman one. Of course, you open up and you got this, great Brian Bolland cover as well. So I'm like, already off to a great start. And it's a good issue as well. I've got some interesting thoughts about that though. But
good.
We'll get into it. But so 2000 AD, so second issue, second prog. Of 2000 AD. We'll go back to 1977, Hulk's 1991, and then Batman Dark Knight is 2002. So we'll go through them in that order. So let's go back, but let's do before we dig into the exact to the issue, because you've just shown me something rather special. You've got a copy of Prog 1 for a start, the first issue of 2000 AD, and the second. You've saved your first 100 issues of 2000 AD from when you were a kid, and that's something special. So, like, you've got like a real relationship then with 2000 AD, like going back to the day. Like, do you remember how you came across it as a comic, like in your newsagent or whatever?
It was in my newsagent, and if memory serves, the first one I picked up was issue 2, and I don't know if my nerd brain kicked in even back then, but I thought, oh, where's number 1? And these are the days where the newsagent was literally sell or return, but he had one left. So I picked up issues 1 and 2 together, and I devoured them. Because obviously I was 7, and I probably shouldn't have been reading, if I'm honest. Especially stuff like Flesh, but I can't remember being horrified or scared by it, because I think at that age I was still more drawn in to the black and white art and the intricacy of it. It was just dinosaurs. A man with what was like superheroes. I've always loved superheroes, and 2008 was different, but Mac 1 satisfied the superhero craving in me, because it was a completely different type of superhero, computer in his brain and like hyperpunctures, like acupuncture, and that made me want to read about what's acupuncture. And 2000 AD was just this comic that I was used to, the Beano and the Dandy.
Yes.
And reprints of Silver Age Batman saying, "Hey, chum," and fighting on giant typewriters with Robin, and 2008 is just like a real breath of fresh air. And I just remember picking it up and not putting it down, because you said very sweetly that they're in very good condition. They look better on the webcam than they do and feel in real life. But these are comics I don't think I could ever see myself parting with.
Yeah,
because of the memories.
Understand that. Yeah, I understand that. Like, you have like that relationship with them, you have that connection to them. And one of the things you say about sort of being 7 and sort of like, you know, should you have been reading them or not? You know, it's that thing like I say that I remember sort of, yeah, I remember, you know, I came onto 2000 AD sort of in the late 80s, and I'm the same as you. I think there's like a British sort of rite of passage. Like, if you started on the Beano or the Dandy, like you had those annuals or those, and then you're like, I'm old enough now, you know, I need to move on, I want something new, and you find these comics. And it can be, you know, during the sort of like, we all, I don't actually know, I'll say we all know the story, you and I know the story of 2000 AD.
Oh yeah,
but like, you know, but it's not, you know, it's one of those things of like, you know, it came about because of like all these different things that were going on within the British comic industry at the time, and these rebellious guys, led really by Pat Mills, was like, no, we're gonna not save the industry, but we're gonna put our stake in the ground. We're gonna do this thing. You know, Action Comic had been, you know, waylaid by the sort of censors, and so they're like, well, if we can't beat up if we can't show humans and human blood, we'll show aliens and alien blood, and we'll do it that way. And so this comic was born, and really, like, 2 is a milestone issue as well, isn't it? Like,
it's a beautiful piece of work.
Yeah, well, it's on newsprint, and so you said the art. One of the things is that, you know, this is designed. It's pulp, isn't it? Like, it's pulpy. Like, it was designed to be almost disposable. Like, I don't think they ever thought, like, in 45 years, people are still going to be talking about this thing.
It really didn't. I mean, the fact that it's gone through a few publishers since. But it's always kept that aesthetic, particularly with the hiring of the European writers and artists, where they picked people who weren't just flashy action scenes. I mean, they could do all of that, but the acting and the storytelling and the personalities of each character, the facial expressions, the body language, which to me, obviously, as a 7-year-old, way over my head.
Yeah.
But looking back at these now, arguably the worst thing about them is the dialogue and the script. The art, still to this day,
stands up.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah. It's leagues ahead. I think, like you said, I think you do read the dialogue, and it has that slightly heavy-handed Bronze Age
time, melodramatic kind of feel.
Yeah, which in some cases kind of works. Like, I like the Dread script for that as well, because it has that sort of like, you know, what is it like? The judge, Alvin comes back, and they're like, he's arrived back, dead. And I love all that stuff. But you're right. But, like, you know, Carlos Esquire doing certain art, and you know, you mentioned like sort of Dave Gibbons, and these artists, I think they were given like a freedom, weren't they? They were just like, they wanted to do this good work, and it shows. Like, you do go back and you watch, like, you go, oh, it's
gorgeous.
Yeah,
totally gorgeous. I mean, it's a crying shame that it's only after reprints and wonderful things like Best of 2000 AD magazine that you find out who wrote and drew these things. Because I'd forgotten that these early progs of 2000 AD didn't have writer and artist credits, and I've had to do some fairly deep online research to find them. And we were chatting before we started recording. Dave Gibbons' work on Harlem Heroes. I mean, has that guy always been a genius, or is it me? I mean, his work, it's beautiful.
Yeah, there are certain artists that when you go back to their early work, you go, oh, I can see what you picked up, but you've developed and you've grown this style, or you've grown whatever. Like, but then there's other artists that just sort of like hit the page, and you're like, yeah. Oh no, you're just phenomenal.
Gibbons, Bolland, Esquerra. That's 3 of them, and they're 2000 AD alumni.
Yeah, these guys. And you said about, like, you know, one of the things that you see throughout 2000 AD's history is giving these sort of smaller or European or international artists a go. Especially, you know, in the 90s as well. In the 80s, you had sort of a growth of it. In the 90s, they introduced like the paint art, the painted art, and all this other stuff. And it's always, if not pitch perfect, it's always interesting.
Absolutely.
And I've always admired them for doing that and being that sort of like willing to do that kind of stuff. But let's sort of focus on Prog 2 because that's what you've picked.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give a quick list of what's in there, and then we'll go through the artist and the writer and the artist. So I've got a list here. So it was Invasion, The Resistance, Part 2. Yeah. Flesh, Book 1, Part 2. Mark 1, Vulcan, Part 2. Dan Dare, The Biogs. Harlem Heroes, The Harlem Heroes. Futuregraph, that was the thing. And then Judge Dredd, Judge Whitey. So they were the sort of the stories that were in there. So yeah, let's just quickly go through those one by one. I think like Invasion, The Resistance. So who's the team on that? Just to give them their credit.
It's incredible. The script was by Jerry Finley Day, who obviously went on to write some amazing stuff like Harry on the High Rock, amongst other things.
Yeah.
And the art, pencils and inks, which is mind-blowing, was by Jesus Blasco, a countryman of mine, and lettered by Jack Potter. Now, for me, this is one of the stories where it's the actual characterization, and I said the storytelling that shone through, because let's be fair here. Bill Savage is a psychopath.
Yeah.
Rightfully so, because his wife and kids have been destroyed by the invading Volgan army. But he's literally the Punisher without the skull on his chest, all out to destroy these invaders. And that second chapter, to me, which is why I picked 2000 AD Prog 2 over Prog 1, not just because of Judge Dredd, it's because of the progression of the story. Whereas what I love about 2000 AD, even though it's episodic, even though it's a serial, you can pick up Prog 2, as you've discovered for this show, and not need to really know what happened in Prog 1, because they tell you in a little line of dialogue, in what's happened beforehand, in what's happening to the country. And the level of storytelling genius that is required to do that. But with a monthly, it's not so hard, because it's been a whole month and, but weekly, snippets, 5-6 page stories to keep that momentum going, blinding. And that's
the point. Yeah, that point that you make there about sort of like, because this isn't an anthology comic, like it's not this isn't a trade, like this is each of these stories, like I say, between 5 and 8 pages, and to do that takes such talent to be concise yet have new action and progression every issue. And it's something I think you do get to sort of like respect. And there's you hear it from guys that have come up, sort of like some of the big names like Garth Ennis, Grant Morrison,
Alan Moore.
Alan Moore. Yeah, they'll say to you like, cutting your teeth on 2000 AD, makes you sort of like have to be concise and sort of like you have to learn a certain type of storytelling. And from, like you said, from the first couple of issues, like they nailed it. Like these were guys that had probably done it elsewhere, but it's a talent, it's a real skill. But yeah, you mentioned about Bill Savage, because again, one of the things is we need to understand the political landscape and also the political leanings of, in particular, Pat Mills,
yes,
and John Wagner and others. This is an angry comic.
Very, very. And of course, as a kid, I didn't pick that up at all. I just saw dinosaurs and action and tanks and airplanes and a future cop with a motorbike that could drive itself. And it was just like, I've never seen anything like this before. And I mean, looking back at it now, and this is something I love about comics, it fits scarily well with the world of today. That whole North Korea vibe with the Volgans is like, what the actual F are these guys prophets?
Well, I mean, it was, they use the Volgans were obviously a play, a stand-in for Russians and stuff, but and it's to be fair, still maybe the Russians, the way things are going, but you're right, like it still feels relevant. Like you watch this and you say like, the political landscape hasn't changed a great deal. If anything, like you say, some of this feels prophetic. We'll get on to Judge Dredd in a minute, but but Invasion's a good one, and I think it's everyone knows. There's like a period of 2000 where like there's like a milestone. I think late 80s into the 90s and moving beyond, where like people go, oh yeah, I know that character. There's ones that stand out, and not just Dredd, Strontium Dogs, Rogue Trooper, those ones. But like, there's these ones that have almost been forgotten. But you only know them if you know 2000 AD. And you do think like, I wish they had more mainstream attention. And Bill Savage is definitely one of those. Like Invasion's one of those.
Totally.
Like, oh man, this would be ace. Like this needs a bit of a wider attention. Go on then, Flesh. Flesh. Let's move into Flesh because it's an instrument.
As a kid, this was probably, along with Mac 1, my favorite story in the comic because of the dinosaurs. But reading it now as a grown man in his 50s, in this present day, and again, the prophetic powers of these storytellers that world food shortage, there's not enough meat to feed the world. What do? Dinosaurs are going to go extinct. Let's go back and help them and ship over their flesh so that future us can eat it. And it was just like, again, when I was a kid, it was just like, oh, they're hunting dinosaurs, but the dinosaurs are hunting them back. And I just went, yay, cool, munch. But pure magic. So, I mean, I don't know if you know, because with issue 1, with Prog 1, it was almost all plot and script by Pat Mills. But Flesh was written by Ken Armstrong, with art by Jean Bois, again, another European writer and artist, and letters by Bill Nuttall. But what I loved was, it's so violent. There's no way. I mean, luckily, I used to pick up the comics, and back in those days, there was no for mature readers vibe, and because it was English comic, there's no Comics Code Authority. Everyone just assumed, oh, it's a comic. Yeah, it's kid friendly. If my parents knew then what I was reading, they'd probably they'd go nuts. But I never felt that. It never warped or damaged me. I don't think so anyway. But it was just fun. And now as an adult is when it's really hitting home how clever the writing and art in these things were.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. And like I say, some of these will like I say, this balance that it has, this comic has for these different bits and pieces. Like Flesh is great and it looks great. Like it's a beautiful looking strip. I remember, not just to say mine was a few years after you, but like I remember picking up 2000 AD, the Newsagent, and it being next to the Beano, because even the Newsagents was like,
it's comics.
Yep. Beano, Dandy, Judge Dredd, 2000 AD, whatever. Like, like Looking magazine or something like that was like next to it. You're like,
la, Looking.
Yeah. But then they're like, then they'd be like the Viz, or no, the Viz has got to be on the top shelf. And you're like, oh, all right, yeah. So Flesh is an interesting one, and like you say, the violence is great, and it's sort of, it's quite in your face. You said about that melodrama and stuff. It's like in your face. Like they're not pulling back. It's like they were.
Oh no.
They're clearly baiting the censors, aren't they? Go on, try and what you're going to do. And that shows, I think, in a couple of the others as well. Because like Mac 1, you say about Mac 1. I want to get into Mac 1 because Mac 1 is an interesting one because it's clearly like, even they admit it was like, it's our version of the $6 million man.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know how big that was in the UK, if it had, UK distribution, but I think it appeared on TV. So they were pretty clear.
$6 Million Man was a huge part of my childhood.
Oh, really?
The action figures, the t-shirts. Oh, yeah. I mean, the fact that issue 2, Prog 2 of 2000 AD had those bionic tattoos, which I remember putting on and say, look, I'm bionic. I'm the $6 Million Man. And we all did it. Everyone who picked up that comic did that. But Mac 1 was clever in a way because he didn't have machine parts or machine limbs or a fake highlight of the $6 Million Man. He had the computer in his brain telling him what to do, how much power he needed to use, what information he needed to make this jump and that jump. I mean, that's not evident in issue 2. That's in later. But the fact that he would then inject him with like the adrenaline or what he needed to perform these feats, and he had the strength of 50 men. That's repeated for night over the course of the 5-page strip. But it was just like, oh my God, this is like a superhero with no cape and tights, but he's saving the world and jumping on planes years before Tom Cruise did it. Who is Tom Cruise? Mac 1 all the way, mate.
Well, it feels, looking at Mac 1 and when you flip through it, like you say about superhero, because superheroes really are
a rarity in 2000 AD.
Well, they're a rarity in British comics as well, really, aren't they? They're very much like an Americanism. Like we have the heroes of Britain were more, you had like war heroes or space heroes, like Dan Dare, or you get sort of others. So we never sort of feel comfortable doing the cape and cowl bit, really, in this country. It never sort of fits well with British comics. And so we go like, well, let's just strip them down of that and have a guy who can just do this stuff. And it's sort of like, it's more akin to, like I say, closer to like James Bond and that espionage adventure, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I do like that aesthetic. And one of the things is, again, like, as you say, looking back, I think it was the early 2000s, maybe the late 90s. I can't remember. They did a parody issue in 2000 AD of all their sort of like previous.
Really?
They did, and it was not jokey parody. It was on. They did a couple of. They did like Blair one
Tribute parody. Yeah.
It was still.
I
it
would
was
love
still,
to have seen that.
It was still. It was still like pretty hard hitting. But instead of Mac one, it was Blair one. So it was Tony Blair doing stuff. And it was that was quite funny. So even reading this, I was like, I remember that one. That was quite funny.
Yeah.
But yeah. So for Mac one, what were the credits for that?
Script was Robert Flynn, with art by Ennio Leguizamon, so another Italian storyteller, and letters by Jack Potter again. But I love that, even though you could see that these were draftsmen, these are storytellers, the fact that the style is so distinct and different. I like Invasion was a lot darker, grittier, more Punisher-esque, whereas Flesh was actually very Jurassic Park in places, but decades before. But Mac 1 was almost more the lighter comic strip feel. And I don't know if that was on purpose because of the character or because of the situation, but like I said, it felt more like Bionic Bond than a superhero strip. And then the style changes again completely with another Italian artist for the Dan Dare strip, but we'll come to that. So I just love that with an anthology, which is why I thought I was cheating. And I asked you when you said which comics did I want to pick, can I pick an anthology? Because it's not a trade paperback, it is a one single issue comic, so I didn't cheat. But you are literally getting 5 or 6 comics in one with this, and that's what's so beautiful about it.
Oh, I agree. And that's sort of like, as a kid, because we know, I'm not going to rag on the Beano and the Dandy, because as you look, it's the same thing. Like the Beano and the Dandy have this great thing.
They did it in 1 or 2 page strips.
Yeah, like
weekly.
You'd have like Dennis the Mess be on the front cover and the back cover, and that was the story. And then you'd have like you say, a 2-page strip for like the Bash Street Kids or Billy Wins
in the
or
center
whatever.
pages. Yeah.
So like it's you have this sensibility, but as I think as a British comic reader, and it's just so well done that you do. I remember picking this up and as a kid and being like, I've got how many stories?
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
Value for money.
Yeah,
unimaginable.
I know what you say.
And they were how much?
Oh,
8p.
8p.
What?
Well, that's the thing as well. I'd say that the price of 2000 AD was always reasonable. I think it still is now, to be perfectly honest.
What you're getting?
Yeah. I struggle a little more now I'm older, because I do sort of go, I've read 8 pages, like I'm desperate. So I often trade weight now for things. But I think you're right. I think as a kid, I mean, I wish I'd been able to pick these early ones up, because I think it'd blown my mind. I'd have been like, what is this? Like,
Yeah, it was so different. I mean, it's evoking the emotions in me now as a grown man, where I thought, I just never seen anything like it. It was a real punch in the gut, different thing. And I'm just so glad that my parents never realized what it was I had in my hands.
Thank you for newsagents for never looking at the content and putting it amongst the other stuff. One thing I would say before we move on is about this, because it came out in 77. There's a bit of a zeitgeist change in that year, because you also get Star Wars coming out.
Yeah.
And so you get like the birth of not the birth, because that's a stupid thing to say, but like, you
birth
get
of sci-fi love in the country. Yeah. Something they hadn't seen since the 60s. Yeah.
No, exactly. And I think it reinvigorated a lot of stuff. And so I think people were looking for something, and I think that really gave this, 2000 AD a boost. Because we'll talk about the next one. This was sort of, I'm not saying a rebirth, but like they brought back Dan Dare. Like he had Eagle. He had Eagle comics, and Dan Dare was a flagship character that you never see anymore. I think it's a real shame. Like Dan Dare should, like someone like Titan Comics or someone like should be doing a bloody Dan Dare comic.
IDW. Yeah,
IDW.
Definitely.
Someone needs to be doing one. I find it baffling that they're not, but it's a great property that someone should be doing with. But so you got Dan Dare, who was and from my understanding,
he was a star in the original issues before Judge Dredd really took off. The star of 2000 AD was Dan Dare.
That was the selling point, and that's what I was going to say. Was it? That's what they thought their big selling point was going to be, Dan Dare. And you said like another great artist, like another transitional art. This goes from one thing to the next. It's so good.
I mean, this is the guy who, along with Mick McMahon, did the early Slain strips.
Yeah.
But for me, his crowning achievement, and it's a really Marmite strip for 2000, he was Ace Trucking Company. I love that. I thought it was great because it was really clever adult humor disguised as stupid sci-fi comedy, and that's one of the things that 2000 did brilliant as well. I mean, DR and Quinch.
Yeah,
Hello.
I love the Aaron Quinch. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. But Belardinelli's art in this, if you didn't know it was him, you'd be hard pressed to associate it with Ace Tracking and the stuff he did later. Because again, it's I mean, this is pure hard sci-fi, this Dan Dare strip from 2000 AD too. And it's gorgeous. Really gorgeous.
One of the things I would say is that was interesting. I was looking at some of the panels. I was like, you can see, like you say, he seems to be one of those artists, and there's a few that do this. They'll look at what they're going to draw and go, right, I need to adjust my style to do what is going to be. Like, this can't be too comedy or too hard hitting. Like, it can't be too heavy on the inks or whatever. And this feels a bit like he's looked at earlier Dan Dare,
Eagle Comics. Totally, yeah.
He's totally gone back and gone, oh, that's the aesthetic that this thing has. I'm not gonna copy it, but I'm gonna homage it. I'm gonna fit it so it doesn't feel too jarring, and it does. It feels like a great continuation.
Absolutely, but with his own. When you look at stuff like swirling smoke and mist and the alien figures, it's still got that intricate Belardinelli, those flowing lines of his that he's famous for, and that's when you think, well, actually, that does look familiar, and that's when you realise that this is a guy who is clearly loving and honouring what came before, but putting his unique stamp on it, and that is a real line to balance. Really,
it is,
really
without like you're not stamping all over it, like you're not going to go, right, I'm not going to make it this. And this one I want to highlight is like, because this was a small comic when it came out. Like, I thought they really thought this was going to be a short run. They were totally
it would run for a couple of years.
Yeah, they thought this was going to be like one, and like someone's going to. It's almost like, what do they call it? Like imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
like they were convinced that someone's going to figure this out. Like, it's not going to last, and it's obviously still going now. So, but they thought, but they still threw, like, this is the thing that I think that makes this so strong is like they never half-assed it. At no point where they're like, oh, right, just get so-and-so in to just bang a couple of issues out. Like, no, the artist and the writing is usually pretty strong, or at least got a message.
2000 AD, sometimes random when I think I'm bored. I'll still put to the news agent and just pick up an issue out of nowhere, and every single one I still think, they've still got it. And that is so rare.
Yeah. I think even something like you said, one of the things I love doing, like say, especially with some of the modern issues, because I'm the same. Every now and then I'll sort of like, because I do trade well, I'll see what's going on. I'm like, oh, that looks good. I'll pick that up at some other point.
Dread it. It's hard to read weekly.
Yeah, sometimes, like I say, because I've got the app, so sometimes you go into the graphic novel section and go, oh, wicked, they've got that now, bang that. But you do sort of look at them and you go like, the art from story to story now is so different and so experimental at times. I'm like, like you say, they're not half-assed. They're still doing their thing, which is great. We're going to talk about someone we know now, and someone I think we know, everyone should know, Harlem Heroes, because this is an interesting one.
Again, we didn't even know that in some ways the UK in 1977 was more progressive than the comic scene worldwide today. This was a team of black heroes in 1977. And I didn't realize that as a child. I just saw really cool guys flying around in a dangerous sport, and screw you, J.K. Rowling. This is Quidditch before Quidditch, but with violence, fisticuffs, martial arts, and jetpacks thrown in. This is the real deal. And like we've said since we started recording, Dave Gibbons. What a legend. I mean, he's lost nothing. I mean, in fact, if anything, he was more detailed then than he is now. He's loosened up a lot more. But again, the dynamics, the body language, and the one British artist in this issue, I don't think is this a Scarer? No, Mike McMahon penciled the Dread strip, but Gibbons' art in Harlem Heroes is just to die for.
Yeah,
it's stunning, and again, so progressive. And the way they recruit, because in issue 1, half the team got killed. Yeah. And in issue 2, they're recruiting. And the fact that they've got an old guy joining the team who's a veteran, I mean, progressive, inclusive, in 77 in ways we can only dream of today. And people are saying, oh, we're all woke with this, something, that, and the other. Sorry. No, we're not. We're going backwards, mate.
Yeah.
If damn anything, you, Trump.
Yeah. If anything, though, it's that thing of like you say, it's not even an issue. It's just like, oh yeah, these are the Harlem Heroes are going to be these characters, and this is it, and you're just following those. Brilliant, it's great. And it is. It's like you said. You say about Gibbons. Like you said, he's one of those artists that I like to see. You know, like he obviously went on to do a lot of stuff, and obviously, you know, Watchmen aside, like the amount of stuff this guy did. I think he pretty much drew for like every strip. Like I've recently been going back and reading Rogue Trooper.
Oh, genius!
And his work on Rogue Trooper is
genius,
absolutely like
phenomenal.
Yeah, like from the off, and it's one of those things again. Like we were saying before, we were saying about artists that just hit the road or just sort of like. And again, like I think like Rogue Trooper is a character that needs a push. Like there's rumors of what's it? I forget his name, Duncan, whatever, David Bowie's son, doing a Rogue Trooper movie. Great, because it needs it, and because it's an amazing character. But like you say, this guy's art is just sort of like on point always. Like
day one,
yeah.
From day one. I mean, no, sorry, you saying?
No, I was going to say one of the things I'm looking back through a lot of this. One of the things I often find, and you're a comic critic, like, so you see this stuff a lot. One of the things I often sort of, when you spot art, anatomy, like in action poses, is difficult. Like, you know, sometimes it looks a little off, or you know, and if sometimes it can be glaringly off, or just a little bit like uncanny valley kind of off. But you go through this book, this comic, and some of the stuff that's drawn in this, and the thing I'm sort of hitting on Dave Gibbons because you say about the sports stuff and the sort of the constant action, like. There's no fault. There's nothing to fault in this.
It's actual people doing athletic things. It's not like superhero poses, guns flexing, buttocks clenched. It's just natural sports people. And where you can really spot it is, and I didn't realize it, there's a one-page ad showing the tech of the Harlem Heroes, how they do work and their helmet and stuff like that. And the picture of Giant isn't by Gibbons, and you can spot it a mile off, but it is the first piece of published art by Kevin O'Neill.
Oh, really?
That's actually Kevin O'Neill. And compared, because we know that this guy turned into a 2000 AD legend. I mean, Nemesis the Warlock, to me, is one of the greatest strips ever to come out in 2000 AD. That's pure Kevin O'Neill. And League of Extraordinary Gentlemen with
he's got
Alan
such like martial law. Like the guy's got such a definitive style that, like, you know, excellent.
That you would never know
was
the same artist, because that was his beginnings. And it's just wonderful to see again that progression of these guys who are legends now and where they started off. But like you say, Gibbons from day one, wow.
Yeah, he is like an amazing artist, phenomenal artist. And I would like him like when he goes on to do so much other stuff. And I say, but yeah, anyway, so we'll go in. But last one, and you know, this is the special one.
Saving the best for last.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting one because it's like you say, this is Judge Dredd, Judge Whitey. So this is the first appearance of Judge Dredd. Didn't appear in the first prog, only appeared in the second. Written by, I believe, is this still early? Is this John Wagner early, or is it someone else?
It says Peter Harris, but I'm sure that was a pseudonym. I'm sure that was a pseudonym for Wagner or Grant or Mills.
This is what actually I'm not sure. So this is a question I had, and I need to go back because I listened to probably last year now. Well, no, probably even before. Christ, Pat Mills did that the biography, you know, the history of 2000 AD.
Yeah,
great book. If anyone gets a chance to read, I'll put a link in the notes below because it's a fantastic book.
Do it, read it.
But in that, he talks about sort of like they actually got just some random guy in to do a story for Judge Dredd, who was like an accountant or like something weird, because they didn't have time to. I've still got a feeling that this might be it.
It might be him. Okay,
because the first one that was supposed to be drawn was meant to be drawn by the great Carlos Carrera, and he didn't have. They didn't have a story ready, and they said, "We've got this one." And obviously, he said, "You know, McMahon was there." And was like, "Well, we'll get it done." So this wasn't supposed to be the first issue, and I've got a feeling that's it. So I'm not saying that's. Don't quote me, but I just have a feeling that that's actually what it is.
But if that's the case, that's even more impressive.
It is, yeah.
Because honestly, so much that came after is already foreshadowed in this simple 5-page story. Like the Chief Judge, who was called something completely different than this, and the Mega City, and the fact Whitey appears years later after
Yeah,
he
they
comes
bring him
back.
back. Yeah,
But the whole thing of from the first appearance, Dredd is the one they all want to prove themselves against. He's
Yeah.
the greatest judge. He's the toughest. He's the meanest. If we kill Dredd, we'll be legends. This, that, and the other. And that's from his first appearance.
yeah,
And if this is from a guy who isn't a proper comic script writer, then damn,
yeah.
I bow to you, sir.
I think it was one of those where he wanted to be, because it says, I'm just looking at it, it says Peter Harris here in the I've got the complete Judge Dredd, and one of the things, here you go. So there's two things in this that's really fascinating. So we know now, obviously, you and I are big Dredd fans. The Dredd that came about is this authoritarian regime.
Yep.
The justice system is what controls Mega City, and a bunch of mega cities across the globe. Came about because of the war, the nuclear war, blah, 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 right? So in this, though, it opens with this great thing where you can tell that they're still trying to find their way, because it's here you go. Judges are special lawmen of the 21st century, elected by the people to enforce the law. And there you go. And you can actually see that what they're not, because it says police on one of the things. So the police are still involved in this. The judges like a special squad.
Yeah.
And that goes away very quickly.
Very quickly.
But like you said, but there's a lot of other stuff like Dredd being the top dog, and this idea of the judicial system being in place. And one of the weird things of this is, though, Dredd doesn't kill anyone really in this first issue. The punishment is excellent. I love it.
Oh, it's awesome. we should learn a thing or two from that.
Yeah. Just drop people in the middle of the M25 for 5 years. You drop someone on an island, a traffic on, they can't get off because the traffic is so fast all around it. But yeah, it feels like, I'm not going to say softer, but it's clear that they were sort of like with Dredd, they were still sort of finding their feet a little bit, which is quite interesting.
But still, the way that they made him a force to be reckoned with, even though, like you said, he doesn't kill anybody. And the fact that the bike's there from day one, he's got his superiors that he answers to, but he's still the most dreaded and, well, pun intended, dreaded and feared judge on the streets. It's just magic. Really is so cool.
It's one of those things, like I said, that, like we were saying about the characters before. Throughout 2000 AD, when you go, and I think you have like a longer history than I. There are certain characters like from the first issue, and you go, "Oh, yeah, this is going to stick around for a while." And then there's others you go, I love this one, like it's a cult favorite, but I know it's not going to go well. Like I have like favorites of like Armored Gideon and Finn that I'm like, yeah, they're never going to be given the full love that I would love them to be, but then like you say, the first issue of Rogue Trooper, you're like, oh yeah, no, this I totally understand why this went for so long and expanded for so many years. And the same with Dredd. Like you read this first issue and you're like, oh yeah, no, I completely understand why this worked, and why after a couple of issues it sort of just took off.
Pure magic. I mean, that costume design for a start, and it's evolved over the years, but basically the helmet, the shoulder pads, the badge, stuff like that, it's enhanced, but it's virtually identical. That's Judge Dredd from his first appearance, and that is superb. Yeah,
it's one of those things that they say, if you can identify a character from their silhouette, then you're onto a winner. And even in this early iteration, you're like, oh no, I can see, in fact, I was thinking as I was reading it earlier on, I was sort of flicking through the story, and you see these, like you'll see them on Twitter or sort of Instagram or wherever, and people will do all the iterations of the uniform of sort of like the costumes. People like Batman from 1939 through to now and whatever, or Superman from then, or Green Lantern or Wonder Woman. And I was thinking like, I'd love someone to do a Judge Dredd one. Like, 1977.
Accepted.
Yeah, like, could you do it? Like, here's all the milestone ones. Like you say, you'd see like the shoulder pad increase or the eagle, and then you get
out there somewhere.
Someone must have done it. I'd love to see it. Like I was
crime if it isn't out there, wouldn't it?
Yeah, like how good would that be as a poster? Like, as a pin-up. Like all the
take something down off my wall for that.
Yeah, think it's because it's 45 years to this year, isn't it? So this is the 45th year this year. And also one thing is that there's actually I'm sure is it Judge Dredd or 2000 AD? I think it will be Judge Dredd comic. It's the Comic Museum has got an event on at the moment, an exhibit of all the art stuff. And I'm like, I was thinking about all that. I was thinking, like, it feels like there's a missing. Like, I want to see that. Like, like it was the cover. It was the cover on here. So I've got the complete case files #1. If you, on the front of that, it's like the one of the early silhouettes of Dredd. And I was like, start with that. That sort of thing.
With the years,
yeah, and then go through the years. You've got the much smaller shoulder pad and sort of the different collar, and then go through the years, like, or at least the iterations of where things start to change. Like, it would look ace. It'd be awesome. Heavy metal Dredd in there somewhere, like in the 90s. That crazy.
Oh, your Simon Bisley style,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff, man. Oh, I'm gonna have to do some of my research after this episode now, Scott. I mean, someone must have
I've set the horses. I've set the dogs racing.
Yes,
I want to see it. I want to see it. Like, that's something.
Yeah.
So yeah, Steve, if you can find it, Rebellion, if you're listening, like,
Yes.
In fact, I might. There's a couple of people I might even sort of contact and be like, has this ever been done? I might do some let's say some research as well, and have a look at this after. But yes, we'll move on from 2018. But any final thoughts and everything about this issue? Because I think we've lauded it an awful lot.
I say thank you to Pat Mills and to everyone involved with this comic, because, like you said, 45 years later, it's not just still going; it's still going strong. You said beautifully that this is a comic where every single creator is giving it 100% weekly.
Yeah.
That is a task.
Yeah.
And the fact that this tiny little British comic that no one ever thought would run more for a couple of years has had 2 Hollywood blockbusters come out of it. And Judge Dredd is known globally. Well, what can I say? It makes me proud to be British.
It does. What I would say is, though, you say, it's had 2 Hollywood blockbusters. Oh, well, almost 3, because, well, not blockbuster, but the film Hardware.
Oh yeah, complete rip-off, totally. Yeah, and they admitted it decades later, didn't they?
Yeah, I was going to say they admitted it. So that's totally a thousand future shock. So, so I'll take that as well. But what I would say is, it's sad to me that there's not more. And I know that some of the rights have been sold off to people. They just sat, like I said, we hear rumors of Rogue Trooper, but like you said, like, just from this issue, like, why isn't there a satirical show like of Invasion? Or Harlem Heroes would be great. Like, there's if you like dinosaurs, with like Jurassic Park's good, right? Do Flesh,
Yeah, absolutely. Jurassic Park for a mature audience, rated R Jurassic Park.
Yeah,
dude.
And as you go through the history, exactly, you go through the history of 2008. There's so many characters. I'm just like, what? Why is this not
Slain?
Slain, yeah,
mate. I would watch the ever living shit out of a Slain movie or 10.
Oh, can you imagine? Like, if you think Conan the Barbarian, if you think Arnie as Conan the Barbarian was good, like, wait till you meet this Celtic nut job. Like, it'd be amazing.
Conan for breakfast.
Yeah.
Warp out, baby.
I was going to say, that's what I'm saying. Can you imagine, like, no one knows what they're doing? I'm going to go see this sort of, I think it's like Braveheart, and then he warps out, and you're like, no, it's not.
And Echo.
Yeah, a dark fantasy epic. Again, like, the world is ready for these kinds of heroes, or anti-heroes, I should say. Like, I think
just ready. I think we're in desperate need of these characters, to be quite honest. Because I'm really starting to get Marvel fatigue.
Oh yeah,
I want someone to do with the comic book movie what 2000 AD did to me when I was 7 as a kid.
Well, it's funny. Like, before we move on, one of the things is, I've watched the first 3 issues. Thank you very much. Of Peacemaker, and you watch that and you sort of go, yeah, that's sort of what this needs. Someone to sort of like give it an injection of like, I don't give a fuckiness. Like, we're gonna do something different. And I think if you were to have something like Slain, or like a badass war film like Rogue Trooper, or something like just come out of nowhere, I think it would come out of nowhere, and if you did it right, it would absolutely obliterate, like, things left, right, and center. Yeah.
Well, I need to ask your opinion on something, mate, because obviously, even though I might have a longer history with these comics, I will bow down to your knowledge of 2000 AD and Dredd to mine, because you've literally got back and rebought and collected everything.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the Judge Dredd Origins series they're making, and then the casting announcements they've made?
I've sort of kept away from some of it, because we keep getting teased.
Yeah.
You know, they were like Dread, and when Dread came out in 2012, I was
The
like,
fact there's official casting surely must make you think, oh, actually, maybe this is happening now.
I'm hoping. I haven't seen it because you know they had the Mega City, and there was a big announcement, we're going to do Mega City, and it's going to be a TV show, it's going to be about the judges, and like Dread will appear in it, and it may be Carl Urban, it may not be, and we're going to do this and that, and there was going to be all these web releases, and there was these announcements, and they were going to do casting, and I was all in on it, and then it just went and died. And then you hear this thing and you're like, I've been teased too much. Until I see, it's almost like until I hear cameras are rolling, I don't want to know. I'm excited. It's one of those things I'm excited, but I'm like, until I hear cameras are rolling or something,
Wise.
I'm a bit like,
Very,
I don't
very
want to get my hopes up again. It sounds great. Like it sounds like the concept sounds ace.
Well, the fact that they've cast one actor to play Rico and Joe for a start is already better than Armando Sensei and Sylvester Stallone, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a step in the right direction. It's a step in the right direction. Yeah, I know. Yeah. They do look vaguely similar.
Yeah.
You mean they're Italian American? That's what I mean. Yeah.
That's identical, isn't it? They're clones.
Yeah. They're ethnically close. Yeah. I often think that when you watch that film, and I'm like, I'm not entirely sure you understand cloning. But then they didn't have the tech. We should have done that story then. But there you go. I am excited, but I'm very conservative. Simply because I know what I'm like. I'll go all in, and then they'll be like, you know, it can't. We've done a pilot, and it hasn't been sold.
We were holding out for the Dread sequel so long, weren't we?
Yeah. And that's exactly because there was announcements of that. There was like Carl Urban was like, I'm all up for it. I'll do this. And like, what's it? Alex Garland was like, you know, it's been released on DVD and it's been Blu-ray. It's actually now made enough. It's now made a big profit. It's become a cult hit. All these critics were lauding it. Nothing. And so I am now like, and this rule goes for all things now.
Wise, mate. Very wise.
Not just for this, but like every time I hear a rumor, I'm like, until I hear cameras are rolling, you know, it's like I'm a big fan of like The Evil Dead, and they were like, they're going to do this with The Evil Dead, they're going to do that, and I'm like, until I hear that Bruce Campbell's in front of a camera, like
that's what I wanted you to say. Bruce Campbell, no Bruce Campbell, no film.
Until Bruce Campbell's in front of the camera, like I'm not involved. So you know, that's my stance at the moment. Come and ask me in a couple of months, and you might hear me squealing like a little girl. I don't know, you know. We'll see. We'll pick it up. We'll pick up the conversation. Right. Anyway, let's jump forward in time. Let's jump forward. So we're going to jump forward a decade. We're going to jump to 1991, and an excellent early 90s comic, Incredible Hulk 377. And just give them the plot, Steve. If you just give the plot of this issue, and then we'll get into it, because there's a couple of things on this one I want to talk about.
It's incredible because it was 3-4 years into Peter David's legendary decade-long run on the Hulk, where when you get a writer who no one's made more of a mark on Hulk than this guy, but he did it in a way that honoured Stan and Jack and Steve Ditko and Bill Mantlo and Herb Trimp and everyone that went before him, the Buscemi's, because he just wanted to give the world a rationale as to why the Hulk was grey on his first appearance. Yeah. Spoke like a grumpy teenager for years. Then he was a mindless child. He grew in size, shrunk, was stronger, was weaker. Bruce was in control. Bruce wasn't in control. And he basically made it that, with a combination of 377, that everyone had treated the Hulk as a physical threat. When it was all in Bruce's head, his abuse as a child, the wife killing dad, which is something that Tony and I love about Ang Lee's Hulk movie and other people hate, but I think that film's a masterpiece. It was very true to the comics. And literally, this is the story where finally Bruce and Hulk realise that they are one and the same. They can't live without each other. And you said it beautifully before we started recording. Stuff like Immortal Hulk.
Yeah.
Every modern age Hulk story would not exist without this one issue and Peter David's work. So this is where we first meet a permanent or semi-permanent, because nothing lasts forever in comics, intelligent Hulk. And it's so well done. because he doesn't do it with chemicals or a radiation bath or being bombarded by gamma rays. No, he sat down and got psychoanalyzed by Leonard Samson.
Yeah, this is what this issue, because again, I'd never read this and I didn't know this, and so like when I was reading it and I was like flicking through it, and it's fun. The thing is, what you said about things, it's fun. It's a fun issue. Like there's some interesting bits.
Great comic. Yeah.
It's a really good comic. Like it opens with a bit of humor, you know, when the two, because you've got Grey Hulk and Green Hulk, and then sort of Bruce and sort of sat in the middle. Like they are, like you said, they're in group, as it were. And then the two Hulks trying to go at each other, but they can't physically attack each other in this mindscape. And to be fair, like you said, Peter David's arc is definitive. It's one of those arcs, isn't it? Characters have those sort of like you think of like Frank Miller's Daredevil, you think of like these
Swamp Thing, Neil Gaiman's Sandman.
Exactly, these sort of arcs where you go like, oh, that's the definitive run. Like everything that you said, like stuff that came before it maybe is like bits and pieces, and then this happens, and then it sort of re-baselines the character, and just everything grows off that. I often think of like Brubaker's Captain America as well.
Yes,
those sorts of things.
Completely, yeah.
But all of a sudden you get a shock, and you're like, oh, this character's now doing something different, and that's what this feels like, and it's so sort of like fresh. And being a Moon Knight fan as well, so this approach to sort of like DID, but taking it seriously, and having this thing about,
with respect,
and having this idea of the trauma, like not just sort of like this trauma is what drove it, and then having this sort of monster father figure, literal monster father figure, like it's so good, like it's so well done.
So glad you liked it. I'm really happy about that.
No, I was just really impressed. I mean, it's got, like you say, it balances some of the greatness, because it's got this great psychoanalytical stuff going on, and it has some fantastic scenes where this monster thing attacks the two Hulks and breaks them because they fear this monster. Yet it's still got some of that sort of like 80s and 90s silliness. Like you've got the guy who's hypnotizing him.
Yeah. Ringmaster.
Ringmaster. And he's got, there's some great lines where he's like, I shouldn't have even been in prison in the last one. Wasn't my fault. I didn't know what my guys in the circus were doing. Like, there's just that, there's still that comic book silliness where I'm like, I love that. That's great. That's what I love about this. But it's there's a couple of moments that are just, like I say, just like heart-wrenching. Like when I'm doing spoilers for everyone. If you read it, it's amazing
to read this.
When he does have the confrontation of having to remember his mother's death, and he I've got it in front of me now. Like Bruce, this sort of mindscape, Bruce back like falls to his knees and grabs his younger self, and he's like, "Show emotion, you cry, shout, do something." And then it just sort of like the little boy turns into the Hulk, and he says, "I reacted, a nuclear reaction. Happy now."
Yeah.
And you're just like, what childhood
Genius
did you have? Like, what did happen to you? That this, like, it's ahead of its time, really. I think
completely. Yeah. And it still reads well today. I mean, sometimes you remember these comics from your childhood or your adolescence, and them being so impactful and so powerful, and then you read them again as an adult, and you think, "Oh God, actually, that's not great." That is not true of this. I mean, Scott, you've really made my day, mate, by saying you've read this and you loved it. Oh, thank you. Because honestly, I just wanted to pick 3 great comics, and this is that. It's just a great comic. It's funny, it's action-packed, it's thought-provoking, it's emotional, and you go away looking at the whole in a completely different way than you ever did before.
Yeah. One of the things, having not read this and then reading like Ewan's recent run, Immortal Hulk, the thing I kept thinking of in my head, though it brought akin to me, it was like Grant Morrison's Batman.
Yes.
Where he was like, "Oh no, everything's canon, and I'm going to give you a reason as to why it's all canon."
Totally.
Like, and this is that same sort of thing where it's gone like, as you said, like, "Oh, I'm going to account for everything. And I'm going to try and box it off, but in a really sort of in a good way. Like we're going to address like Joe Fixit. We're going to address the coloring and all this other stuff." And it does it. And and this is, I can see why this is like a milestone issue. I actually weirdly, when I was sort of looking at this online, You know, obviously things come up like eBay bits and pieces, you know, because I was just looking at a bit of history of it. And this goes for like 80, 90 quid for an issue.
Stop it.
No, I don't know what sort of grade they were, but there was like, yeah, for like an issue of this, it was going for like 80 or 90 quid. So it's clearly like a milestone issue for people. Like I got it on Comixology. And it's one of those where I'm like, I'm going to go back and read some of this because I've read again. It's like Peter David's run. I've read bits of it, but
yeah.
Did you read this when it first came out? Did you?
Yeah, I've got all the issues. I've got every individual issue.
Fantastic! What a collection.
Yeah. Oh.
One thing I'm going to ask. In fact, there's a couple of things I want to ask, and we'll ask us because the art's good as well. It's not.
Oh, it's great, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not groundbreaking, but it doesn't need to be because it's really solid.
It's good, solid comic book art. Absolutely.
Yeah. The last panel. So that you have that you said this configuration, this sort of the Hulk and Bruce and everything comes together, and you get sort of like towards the end, and they're in this sort of like Samson's hospital or office. I'm not entirely sure, but it ends with Green Hulk coming in. It says, "Honey, I'm home." And this was the little thing on with the art. Like it looks really like I'll just show you. He just looks really sinister.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was a bit like, I don't think this is going to go well.
It goes incredibly well.
Oh.
For a while.
Yeah.
Because, of course, rage and losing control. It's literally, he's the Ruffalo Hulk we've known from the recent Marvel movies. But when you... Because that is just a face like, finally, I'm whole. Yeah. Finally, I'm with my wife. Finally, I no longer have to transform. This is me now, permanently, 24/7. But a couple of issues down the line, he gets called into action because he joins like a team of super spies, and he's going around lugging massive 90s Image style guns. I mean, because this is a complete FU to the Image comics, which are stealing readers from Marvel and DC left, right, and center. Yeah. I'm saying, listen, I can out-image you, but I can do it with smart scripts, classic characters. So there's Hulk going around with these massive guns and wearing pink bunny slippers. And it's just pure magic. So yeah, this is like the first iteration. Actually, no, it's not. In the first 6 issues of Hulk, I don't know if you know this, the original Hulk one from the 60s lasted only 6 issues before it was cancelled.
Mm-hmm.
In those 6 issues, we saw the Hulk grey, the Hulk semi-smart, the Hulk managed by Bruce Banner's mind, a Hulk who could control his transformations by being subjected to like limited doses of gamma rays being shot at him, and the whole Immortal Hulk, body horror Hulk, where there was one issue right at the beginning where Hulk transformed, but he still had Banner's head.
Oh, wow.
It was in the original Kirby Ditko Stanley issues. And what Peter David did was he said, well, I need to coalesce this and make it real, but make it A, make sense, and B, still be fun without baffling people and making this all pop psychology gone wrong. Because like you said, this is a deep comic, but with a shitload of humor, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
there's a dip into this run, like that. You know, I've read the bits and stuff. I'm aware of, like this. The first one I've read this. This makes total sense. Like, you know, if you know Hulk, and like you go, oh, okay, I know the Incredible Hulk, and you read this and you just go, oh yeah, this makes total sense.
Incredible Hulk. Yeah,
of course, this makes total sense. You know, I'm thinking of like Chris Phelps. Chris Phelps, you know, our good friend Chris Phelps is a Hulk fan. He likes him from the movies. But I'm thinking, like, yeah, this is what I'm like. This is one of those things. You know, you sort of say to someone, if you like this character, like, here's a run, like, here's an arc. Go read this. This feels like that. And there was a couple of things, and I haven't checked it yet. I haven't got around to it. There's a panel where you first see the small child, with the monster figure. And it's a Christmas morning, and the boy's got like some Meccano kind of thing, he's putting together something, and you got the monster leaning over him, and I'm like looking at him going like, I think this image was redone for Immortal Hulk, where they've they've
Fairly sure
literally
it was,
gone
yeah.
and they have a flashback and it's exactly the same. And I'm like, look,
Yeah.
it's going like, I've seen this, and I'm sure it's in Immortal Hulk. And they've done it. I'm like, and this is where I love certain comic creators where like you love what's gone before, you know your shit. You're not just like you say, you know, gone, I've got this great idea. We're going to make Hulk in space, and you go, right, what does that mean? Like with one of the reasons I think the Immortal Hulk worked and sort of struck a chord with so many people was because it was so. At first, it's good. It's just really well written, and the art, and it's been fantastic. But also, like, it hits that chord of every Hulk fan's gone like, oh yeah, like it knows its origins, it's honored its origins, and to the extent of like flashbacks. So, I will be reading more of Peter David's Hulk, most definitely.
Yes.
Like, it's on the list now. It's on the list.
Brilliant.
So, yeah, I mean, from your reaction, I'm saying you're going to recommend it as a run.
Oh, mate, wholeheartedly.
How many
Absolutely
issues did he do?
Oh God, it was close to 10 years. I mean, it's not going to be easy. I mean, if you've got Comixology and stuff, you're laughing.
Yeah.
But hang on a second. Oh.
You're not going to pull all the issues out now.
No. Luckily with this one, I have got a collection for this. Not including spin-offs and annuals. 136 issues.
That's a really good run. I mean, that's a
Over 10 years.
Yeah.
And all of it is wonderful.
Yeah.
Because he, like you said, some writers just want to come on and forget what went before, make their mark on it. This is mine.
Yeah.
But Peter David, he literally, like I said, went back to the Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, Steve Ditko original 6 issues. He went back to the works of John Byrne, where John Byrne separated the Hulks, and for a while they were 2 different beings. One was a pure rage beast, one was a scientist, but they couldn't live without each other because they were one. They did the physical. They attacked, like they said in this book so beautifully. They attacked the symptoms,
yes,
not the disease. And I think, Jesus, that's a brilliant piece of writing. That's clever. And when you realise that, yes, child Hulk smash is Bruce Banner as a child.
Yeah.
Grumpy teenage Hulk is literally that repressed Bruce's emotions coming out.
Hormones.
I want to meet girls.
Yeah.
I want to go out. I want to have my own way. I want to drink and get rowdy. And you think, oh, Jesus, yeah, of course that makes sense. That was me. I've been there. I've done that. I've lived those. I've had those emotions. And this comic book writer is putting that in an adventure saga, 22 pages, 4-color comic with the most powerful being in the Marvel universe. And it's why I picked this comic, because it is just a great comic, but it's more than that.
Yeah.
You can read it as a kid and love the action. You can read it as an adult and get the psychology, and you can read it as anything in between. And oh, mate, you've made me so happy by saying you want to read more Peter David now, because my work here is done. That for me is just the best compliment you could give.
It's one of the things, you know, just reading this, there's a section, like you say, about the idea of the Hulk representing those different stages of his development, like the child rage and the teenage hormones and stuff. in post Me Too world that we live in now, there's a page and stuff. It does the flashback to him being a teenager, and he's trying to be, you know, he's at college or whatever, and he's like, no, I've got to do my work, and this girl's coming on to him like again and again, and she sort of like keeps pushing him and said, you know, she sort of calls him out like, what, am I ugly? You know, you're afraid that's all, you know, you're afraid to give a girl what she wants and what she needs, which is a little bit, you know, fine. You know, women can be sexually aggressive.
Absolutely.
But then he grabs her and says, I've got what you want here, babe. And he turns into, like, there's a flash of him turning into the sort of the Grey Hulk. And I love that. It's like, no, there's a beast. Like, he's trying to keep this thing repressed, and it's in
exactly
there.
That.
And it's so, like, it's, you know, it's no excuse for you know, sexual assault or rape, but it's saying this thing of like, no, like, you know, when you're a young man, when you're a teenager, like you are trying to be a good guy or something, it's like we have raging hormones, like, you know, and
absolutely,
you sometimes react.
And it shows how good a person Bruce Banner really was not to react that way.
Yeah, and the fact he does
but
feel
the gamma
remorse
rays let it out. Yeah.
So it's a great. I will be reading more. Like, it was a fantastic issue. And I do thanks for sort of. This is why I like doing Desert Island Comics, because there's so much where I read them like, oh, that's on the list. But yes, so we'll move on from the Incredible Hulk. Any final thoughts on this issue? Because again, like, I think it's a great issue.
Nothing you haven't said 1,000 times better, mate. The fact that you've read it and you've seen what a talent David had, and how it's literally been the fuel for every great Hulk story since. If you want to read more Peter David, then hopefully our listeners, by listening to the show, will want to read more Peter David. And if it gets people A, reading comics, B, reading Hulk, and C, picking up work by a fantastic, hugely still under. I mean, everyone's heard of Neil Gaiman, everyone's heard of Frank Miller, everyone's heard of Alan Moore. Too few people have heard of people like Peter David and James DeMatteis. They need to know these writers because they are every bit as good, but they don't do it in a way that's possibly as arty or as, for want of a better word, legendary, like your Watchmen's or whatever else. But you tell me if you've read a better single issue than Hulk 377.
Yeah, no, it's one of those like
light bulb moment, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a like what it is. It's a revelation. But like, as an issue, you get like, we talked about arcs and stuff, and we talked about with the 2000 AD that idea, the ability to have a concise story, beginning, middle, and end. Like that issue is part of a wider story. Clearly,
it's the combination of 4 years, that issue.
Yeah, it's clearly but also you can jump in like I did. Absolutely. And you go, right, the story, the way it's drawn, or the way it's the story is told is like you introduce, you know exactly what's going on, and then by the end of it, you have a resolution. And so I'm like, all right, so this is a chapter in a story. I can see there's a wider story, but I've got like, it's not like I'm left on a cliffhanger that I'm sort of like, well, I'm left on a cliffhanger, but I'm not left on an unresolved cliffhanger. I'm like, oh, that story is resolved. We can move on to the next thing now. Wicked. So. Yeah, an excellently written comic. Right, last of the three. Batman Gotham Knights 32 from 2002, October 2002. This is, again, writers now I'm not hugely familiar with, but Devin Grayson, Roger Robinson, and John Floyd. Cover by the excellent Brian Bolland. Always love his art. But this is called 24/7. So do you want to give a quick sort of overview of what this one is?
This was near the end of a massive storyline, which started with Batman Bruce Wayne murderer, then turned into Batman Bruce Wayne fugitive, where Bruce Wayne was falsely accused of murdering his girlfriend, Vesper Fairchild, the radio talk show host. And he literally went on the run for months and gave up being Bruce Wayne and was Batman 24/7. But it has started having a negative effect on him. So this is when he reclaims the Bruce Wayne name. He goes back to work for Wayne Industries, and obviously he's been cleared of all charges. They've got the real killer. But what I love about this story is because people always say that Batman is nonsense, that he'd do a lot more good as Bruce Wayne. But I said, well, you've clearly never read a Batman comic, because this shows 24/7 is in the title. One day in the life of Bruce Wayne and Batman. And you see that even when he's not Batman, because you don't even see Batman until more than halfway through the issue.
Oh, yeah.
It starts at like 8 a.m. when he gets up for breakfast, goes to a meeting, and you realize that he's hiring ex-cons, giving them a second chance at work. He's feeding old people in shelters. He's watching Robin beating up bad guys, not getting involved, letting his protege do the work. He's building charitable foundations, hospitals, schools, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then it's not until nightfall comes and he turns into Batman that he does the ass kicking.
Yeah.
And this to me is like in 20 pages, a simple, brilliant look at the Bruce Wayne Batman dynamic that I'd never seen before and have seen very rarely since. Again, it's just a single comic that just works as a one-off story. You don't need to know that you stopped being Bruce Wayne for years before that. You don't need to know that he fights the Joker and the Riddler and the Penguin, because there's no costume villains in this.
Nope.
It's Batman fighting crime. Batman checking in on Two-Face in Arkham Asylum and making a chess move against him. Barbara asking Barbara Gordon how her dad is.
Love that moment. Yeah.
It's just the one comment I'd give to people who say that Batman's two-dimensional. No, read this and you realize that he's fighting crime and he's fighting injustice 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
It's one of those things, and it's interesting because I have been in that camp of, and what I will say is there are writers that have been in this camp as well.
Yes,
completely. That Batman is basically, a negative force, almost like a negative force on Gotham, cause he's influencing the chaos and so on and so forth, and that Bruce Wayne is the real mask, and he is actually Batman, and he loves kicking up these just kicking the crap out of these people, and almost that sort of Frank Miller approach has been around and sort of stained the character for years of sort of like no, what drove him was doing this thing. He's psychologically damaged.
Yeah.
And what you get in this issue is a balanced human being where he's like,
exactly,
this is a resolved Batman. This weirdly, this issue makes me think of the animated series. In that way,
baby.
Yeah, in the way
Completely.
that he's like a balanced human being. Like, yes, he is Batman, but like as Bruce Wayne, he's going to be doing good as well. And there's some really, you talk about progressive, like weirdly sort of like this, the way this story plays out. Like, it is 24/7, like it's a day in the life.
Yeah.
And he goes through and I was waiting. This is the cynicism in me. I was waiting for something in the story to sort of not pan out. So there is that moment when the ex-convict is being hired, and he gives that story about how Batman knew who he was, and so he's like, "Well, I know if he thinks I can do better, then I can do better and stuff." And I was waiting for there to be like a
the shoes are dropping him to mess up.
Yeah, I was waiting for something like that, and it never comes. And you're just like, "This is an insanely positive issue." Of Batman,
but it's still totally Batman.
Yeah, so that was good. That that when he bumps into the kid who's the mail delivery lad, and he's sort of like, "Oh yeah," he forgets his name, calls him Kobe rather than Cody. I've got it here, and he says, like, he says, "Oh yeah, I've got into this school," and Bruce is like, "Oh, well done, that's fantastic." And he's like, "Yeah, well, I can only go part time because I can't afford it." And then Bruce is like, "Well, have you heard of the Wayne Foundation scholarship?" And like, gives him the form. And he said, "Well, what have I got to do? How do I get this?" And he's like, "Well, you're an employee, so you've got it."
But for me, you got it.
Yeah. And so and you sort of, I'm constantly going like, what's going to be, like you said, when's the shoe going to drop on this? And there's a couple of things that are interesting. Like, he sends off the bulletproof vests to the Bloodhaven PD, which I love that moment.
Moment's fantastic.
And he has
because there's Dick Grayson there as well, but not Nightwing. Dick Grayson, the cop. Well, and what he says.
More than that, one of the things because I know that they have a fractious relationship at times, Dick and Bruce. But again, this is one where it's just sort of like, he's happy for it. Like it's a nice moment, and he says that why would someone from Gotham give this as a donation? And Dick says like, well, mostly I think he just wants us to be safe. And so it's a nice, again, it's like this is his nice moment. And he tells the guy about there's the developer. He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do this and that." He says, Bruce, like, "Yeah," but Bruce like, personally, I like to do charity. I like to build buildings like hospitals and stuff because you can put your name on one of those, and you can see he's manipulating the can see he's manipulating the guy. And I'm like, of course, like this guy's the greatest detective in the world. Like he's a super intelligent guy. Like, of course, he would be manipulating these guys for positive. And one of the things I think is there's like this is 2002, so again, like within modern comics, but still 20 years ago, there's a gay couple and one of them was saved by Batman, and they have Batman Day and they have a celebration. And I was like, I'm looking at it going like this. I know 2002
exactly,
like we were still a little bit homophobic, but that's fantastic. And this is a positive Batman where you're like, oh, this sort of makes sense. This is what Batman would become once he's overcome everything. Like he's not riddled with, you can't be the greatest detective and all these other things and save the planet repeatedly if you are riddled with mental illness to the scale and depression and guilt and all this other stuff. It wouldn't work. This feels like a guy who's got his shit together. This feels, again, like the Neil Adams Batman or even like the Grant Morrison Batman, where it's like, there's problems, but like, no, mostly he's got his shit together. And I kind of like that, and I thought it was a nice depiction, in contrast to, and especially as we have lately, because I got Batman fatigue because it was like this week Gotham City burns. This week Gotham City burns down, and next week Gotham City burns down, and like it's like, oh Christ. This is just one of those clever issues, like where you sort of like, you again one and done. It's a great story, but it's the positivity of it that I kind of like. I do like. It feels like it makes me think yeah, Batman should be good. Like he should be grim, and the point that
Absolutely.
the criminal should fear him and see the grim side. But like, why is he always got to be an asshole with everybody else?
There you go.
Yeah,
There you go. You've said everything I could ever possibly want to say, Scott. Thank you, mate.
no,
I
sorry,
just
sorry if I've stolen
wanted
all your stuff. I know. I
No,
ramble, so-
it's not. No, it's beautiful. You're making me so happy right now because that one thing. If ever I'm picked, say, oh, pick a comic book of it. You know that Batman's my guy. Batman is my number one. He's my favorite character of all time because of that effect he's had on me since childhood. But I am, like you, so sick of the dark, ruthless vigilante who can't be beaten because I hate that aspect. I don't believe in the god Batman. I
Yes,
think that's
I agree.
crap. I do believe that he could take down anyone he set his mind to, but he would be beaten first. There's no way he could win against anybody straight away. That's crap. And if he was that character, I wouldn't like him.
Yeah,
I like the fact that he is a man who fights alongside gods. He is a man who can die. He gets cut, he bleeds, he cries, but he dusts himself off and he stands back up again until the day he no longer can.
yeah,
And I just wanted to show a Batman comic, like I said, a Dunham 1, 22 read, satisfying little comic where you see, well, actually, he isn't just a kick-ass crime fighter. He's a good man.
yeah.
And he's doing good work from the moment he wakes up to the time he goes to bed. And that's something I wanted to share with people who might have that Batman fatigue. And it's understandable, mate.
It is.
It's
It is.
completely understandable. You said it. You read this and you thought, this is a guy who's got his shit together. This is actually a good comic with a good, solid character in the middle. Boom, job done.
I think about these things, and one of the things I find interesting about, like, Batman, is there is a time when you would have that sort of, like, Batman is a representative of the time in which he is being written. When he's best, when those stories
Absolutely.
stand out, I think he is the best. He's a representation of the time. The reason that The Dark Knight Returns worked in the 80s was because New York in particular and Chicago we had high crime rates. You had gang problems. There was that panic and worry in the street, literally in the streets. They were looking to clean up the city. And so you get this comic that represents that, and deals with it. Great. And you had like the nuclear fear, which the Dark Returns worked because it was released in 86. That's why it works. And so people that try and transpose that to like 2022, like, it doesn't work because those fears are no longer relevant.
Exactly.
But there's there's writers that still want to write, like, Gotham City riddled by corrupt police and riddled with crime. And you're like, no, it's not.
In there.
Yeah.
Done that. Yeah.
What we need is a city that sort of like has worked its way back, and there's a reason that, like, he needs to be there because of the supervillains and all this other stuff. But, like, they need to shift. They need to shift that focus of Batman to be like, how do they make him relevant for 2022? Like, you could have. They keep touching on these ideas of sort of like the police don't trust the capes kind of thing, and it's not been done well yet, I don't think. But when you have got like when we are suffering from police brutality and police corruption still, and you've got sort of like racial tensions and all this other stuff, as you sort of said, damn Trump, kind of thing. Like, there's a great story to be told, and I feel like everyone's avoiding it or like dancing around the edges. So you get this repetition all the time, which is really unfortunate. One last point I wanted to make about the Batman that I like and stuff, and you mentioned about him being a man. Many years ago, someone said to me, Batman is like Rocky. It seems like Rocky Balboa.
Yeah, completely.
He's just a guy that's got the heart to keep going. Like, he is going to get beaten. Like, he's going to get the out. There's no way he beats everybody. He lurks in the shadows. He uses the element of surprise and all this other stuff. But, like, yeah, he will get a kick in, or he's. But like you said, he dusts himself up. He'll stand up and keep going. And I like that. That one more round, or he'll go just one more round because that's what needs to happen. Exactly. And then you get like the Rocky Balboa quote where it's like, life will beat you to the ground and keep you there. It's not about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep going. I'm like, that's Batman. That's what it's about.
Completely.
And so, it was nice to read this positive depiction of Bruce Wayne, let's say, as well. Um,
And it's not a jarring one. That's
No.
the bit I love about this comic. It still completely works. So anyone who may never have read a Batman comic, or to the cynical fan, or to the people who just love the character wholeheartedly like I do, this one single issue is just spot on
Yeah.
every aspect of his character.
and again, like I say, it made me think of like the animated series. I'm like, oh, that's the Batman I loved when I was a kid. Like that's the, you know, when Bruce Wayne was a part of the character and, you know, had that sense of humor and had that relationship with Alfred that was quite funny and stuff. Like, I love all that stuff. So yeah, so no, another good issue. Your choices, you know,
Thanks,
were very
mate.
good. As you know, a Templar
You made me
Knight-
work hard.
It's a hard choice. It's not
You work
easy.
hard, I
No,
tell
it's
you.
not. It's not an easy task. I mean, I did this once for another podcast, and it is tough. Like it's really tough because again, the choices you make today might be very different tomorrow or next week. So it is a difficult choice, but it's fun. You know, it generates these conversations, and I've really enjoyed these. So thank you for choosing
Thank you,
these
mate.
comics, and thanks for going back
pleasure.
and talking 2000 AD and introducing me to Peter David Hulk and sort of. So I'm looking forward to reading some of that. So thank you, D, for bringing those issues to me.
A pleasure, and thanks for asking me on the show. I mean, I hated you for a good few days until I made my choices, but it was therapeutic, it was fun, and honestly, mate, your reaction has made it all worth it, because that's all I want to do, is show people that comics don't have to be deep, philosophical, literary masterpieces. I mean, it's great when they are, but sometimes you just want to pick a comic up, escape, and just read something that will make you happy,
Yeah.
or will give you a thrill, or everything in between. And these three comics did that to me when I was 7,
Yeah.
when I was 19, and when I was a grown man. And fingers crossed they'll do the same for fans for years and years and years to come. That's why I love them.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they will. You're right again, because I think comics get sort of like not a bad name, but get
Pigeonholed.
lumped in. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're either literary or they're comics, and you go no. Like people can do great things in all across. Like everyone, like I say the same with films. Like I love canon movies. Like Cobra is amazing. It's awful, but it's amazing.
Go and cash.
Yeah, exactly. Like I love all that shit. However, I will also then go and watch like Schindler's List or something like that. Like you can
Absolutely.
it's not the content, it's the medium, it's how you use it, and there's room for everything. Anyway, Steve, thank you very much for coming on. It's been an absolute joy talking about these.
Thanks, man.
And I'll have you on for something else in the future. But for now, where can people find you and where can people hear you?
How long have you got? I mean, this is going to be another show by itself. Obviously, I don't just talk. Obviously, I'm on podcasts. Obviously, the Wonderful Comics in Motion. I'm part of the Superheroes for Dummies, where we ask people to tell us the comic characters they want to know more about, and they send us the questions and we answer them on the show. That's on the Comics in Motion feed. But on the DC Comics news feed, I'm on many weeks of the main DC Comics news podcast where we talk everything about the world of DC and comics, movies, TV, and everything else, video games, what have you. And the show I make with my offspring, Adam, I Am the Night, where we break down every episode of Batman the Animated Series week by week, and that's so much fun to do. I'm the occasional guest on other Comics Motion shows, Your Wonderful Show, Indie Comics Spotlight, Max's Wonderful, Mandatory Marvel and DC. You catch me on there every now and then. And on the occasional episode of Mad Love, the Harley Quinn cast, which looks at the Harley Quinn animated series. And written work, just type Steve J. Ray or Fantastic Universes into any search engine you like, and that'll take you to my news, reviews, features, interviews across Fantastic Universes, my site that I own and run with Adam. Dark Knight News, the Batman website which I run. I'm the editor-in-chief of DC Comics News, where I'm a lead features and reviews writer, and CBR, where I'm a comic features writer as well. But if you want to chat to me and ask me any kind of stupid question, just hit me up on Twitter at lstevo, EL_STEEVO. And thanks, Scott. Thank you, mate.
No, and there'll be links down below for all those kinds of different bits and pieces. So check them out. Check out his reviews, because the man does a good reviews. And also, knows his stuff and has guided me today to some great comics, and I appreciate it. But ladies and gentlemen, from our side, if you like what we're doing, if you like anything that Steve does as well, go find the podcast, go on your podcast catcher and leave a review, 5 stars, 4 stars, whatever you want to leave.
Peace.
always like the feedback, and it helps us in the charts, doesn't it? It gets us up there so people see us. But from our side, if you really like what we're doing, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/20cg media. There'll be a link down below. We've got a bunch of other sort of podcasts on there. I do a weekly podcast with my brother from another mother, Julian Darius, trekking through the Twilight Zone. We're doing episode by episode through the Twilight Zone. I do 30-minute thoughts on it every month. And we also have Creator Corner, where I bring on all kinds of different people to talk about what it is they do as a creative force. So go check that out. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening, and we shall see you on the next episode. Well, listeners, before you go, do you love true crime podcasts, but are sick and tired of listening to the same cases over and over again? Seriously, how many times can you listen to a story about Ted Bundy or the Golden State Killer? If I have to hear one more podcast about John Wayne Gacy, I'm going to dress up as a clown and shoot myself. If you feel the same way I do, then you have to listen to Modem Mischief. Modem Mischief is a true cybercrime podcast. They tell stories about the world's most notorious hackers and the lives affected by them. You'll hear stories about the dark web and what goes on down there. And since you guys love the 80s, this week's show is about the teenage hacker gang, the 414s. It's like war games, but real life. Modem Mischief. Check it out wherever you get your podcasts.